Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician and an intimate marriage expert, and I specialize in showing educated, successful couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships. I've been married for 25 years. My husband and I have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing relationship. If you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place. I will show you how. Now, let's dive in. And today, you have such a treat because we are going to meet, hear about, and talk with Gail Bruce. Gail is a beautiful, spicy 80-year-old woman whose life has included living in Chicago, California, all kinds of institutions that are familiar to us. She's participated in sports, driven race cars. She was a model, actor, designer. She's been married. She's a painter. She has had multiple nonprofit businesses. She currently has an incredible company called HipSilver, and we're going to have a remarkable conversation with someone who on paper is an elder, has the wisdom of being an elder, but I don't really think old is a way to describe you. So welcome, Gail.
Oh, well, thank you. Flattery will get you everywhere, my darling. Thank you. I needed that encouragement today. Thanks.
Okay, well, actually, have you used flattery to get somewhere interesting in your life?
Oh, I think not so much flattery, but acknowledgement of somebody's characteristics or traits as sometimes helps. I've also discovered that because I always think of flattery as compliment is very nice, and I use compliments a lot. I think of flattery kind of as somebody saying something to get something in a way. So I was kind of making a joke when I said that, where I have found that when you're engaging with somebody, if you find something nice to say about them, if they've got a pretty scarf on or something that's attractive, it always makes the conversation move a little bit more smoothly. And so, yes, I have used compliments to move a conversation along.
Yeah,
that's a long-winded answer. Forgive me.
Yeah, but it's good, and I really enjoy what you've said, specifically because I think that's an easy tool, if you will, to also use in our intimate relationships, and it's often saved for more professional context or when there's a more clear agenda. And in fact, saying something like that to your beloved has just the same beautiful effect to create a little connection, a little openness. And with that, I'd love to transition and ask you how you met your beloved husband and tell us a little bit about your marriage.
Well, my marriage was quite remarkable, and I miss him every day. We were married for over 50 years, and he was my best friend. He was my lover, the father of my child, my grandchildren, my partner in life, in business, and everything. And he was an amazing person. And when you said that thing about using flattery with or nice compliments with people that you love, I was so blessed because I woke up every morning to this man looking at me and telling me how much he loved me and how wonderful I was. And it gave me the confidence and the ability to do things that I might never have even thought about attempting. And I can't tell you how grateful I am that I fell in love with him, found him, and had enough sense to marry him when he asked me. He was incredible. He was very handsome. He was a wonderful commercial television director. I met him in California. I was doing casting and pre-production in those days. And we worked together. And we had an incredible relationship. And the way we met was magical. I had been living with somebody and we were on the verge of breaking up. And I had planned to move to San Francisco. And Murray came into my life on a job. And it was instant attraction, although I because I hadn't ended my relationship yet, we were in the process of doing it. I could not feel comfortable going ahead with the relationship with him. So it didn't evolve that way. It was a work situation. I did a couple of jobs with him. And then I was driving him home from a shoot one night. And he said, I think I've fallen in love with you. And I want you to come with me. And I'm going to shoot the Chipperfield Circus in northern England. And I want you to come and work with me. And let's see if there's a relationship here. And I'm not an impulsive person like that normally, but I went, yes, I'm going to do it. And I literally went home that night. I ended my relationship permanently with the fellow I was with. I called my parents and I said, I'm going to England. And I packed up my house. We were sharing a house. I packed up my house. I put my belongings in storage. I sold my car, gave my dog to my mom, and I went to England. And I hadn't even gone to bed with him yet. And I wasn't even too sure if it was going to work. But it did, and it was wonderful. And for the next 50 years flew by so fast. And he was an amazing, amazing character. And we fell in love at the circus. And I got to play with babies and tigers and all of that stuff. And it was just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
This is amazing. So this is give or take 1970, the 60s when you went to England in this way?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was great. And I never went back to California. We had a home out there for a while, and we were bi-coastal. But he was it, and he stayed that way all the rest of my life.
This is really a treat to hear. I've been married for 25 years, and so I can speak with conviction and moral authority about how fabulous a marriage can be and how interesting and dynamic and just completely not boring at all, but very engaging in terms of conversation and what's happening in the bedroom and so forth. But you were married for twice as long and can speak out of lived experience. Will you describe what's it like being in love after 35 or 40 years of marriage, and how is it different from being in love early in a marriage?
Well, when you're at the early stage of our marriage, it was all moonlight and roses. It was wonderful. It was so exciting. We were traveling. We traveled a lot. We made the decision not to have children for the first 10 years of our relationship. We didn't put a time frame on it, but mainly because we wanted to just get to know each other and be together. And then my biological clock went off when I got into my late 30s. And I went, gosh, we'll always be a couple, but we'll never be a family. And I wanted to be a family. And he did too. So we decided to have children. And that changes the dynamic in a relationship right away. Especially with somebody who is used to having your undivided attention for almost 10 years before somebody else comes along. So that was a readjustment for both of us. And from the standpoint of the energy, our relationship got deeper and deeper and stronger to the end when he left his body to go on his next adventure. I was very upset that he left me behind. I didn't want to be left behind. I wanted to go with him. And it's been hard being without him. I miss him every second of the day. But it was incredible. And so at the end of our relationship, it was different. It was deeper. It was richer. It was stronger. It was, in so many ways. And the trust was so there.
I believe that having a fantastic relationship is a learnable skill, and that when we put attention on our own growth and willingness to be more self-expressed and receive more of our partner's full self-expression, that we can really grow and deepen and turn on the erotic and companionship energies. And so yes, I think it's really important whom you choose to partner with, but it's not just whom you choose, it's also how each of you participate in that relationship that determines its quality.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's very, very true. I mean, one of the things that I loved about my husband is that I could say anything to him or talk about anything. There were no boundaries in the sense of, sometimes I see couples where they say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to talk about that. And we never had that. I mean, anything that we needed to talk about, we could say. And we never, also, my mother had told me when I was young, never go to sleep on your anger. Yes. And Marie and I managed to accomplish that. I mean, sometimes we would, if we were upset about something, and rarely did we get upset with each other. Mainly because we were so similar on many instances, even though we were bipolar, I mean, polarities from each other in the sense of astrologically and all of that. We were very, very similar. Our likes and dislikes, the food we ate, everything was very similar.
That's so interesting. And for somebody listening, I would say rather than looking for your soulmate, look for how you can cultivate the ability to be so self-expressed as you describe being. I think that is so amazing.
Well, we were very lucky, and we would if the other one wanted to back out of the conversation, we would encourage each other with that by saying we've always said we were going to lay it on the table, and it's important that we do that. And you can get through the angst of it as long as you can get it out there. If you don't get it out, then it becomes like that blanket with the air bubble under it, and you push it down on one end and it pops up over someplace else. And,
yes, exactly.
and it usually pops up in a way that you have no idea where it originally came from. And so it's so much easier to just get it all out. And I found that as we got older, when we were younger, our sex life was a great deal more intense and active, let's say, where as we got older, it became more gentle in a way and more nurturing of one another. And mainly because maybe the knees didn't bend as well, or, something happened where you had to help each other. And that was a huge, big difference. And that was an incredible learning experience also.
Yeah. And then Murray, an athlete, a surfer, had an accident. Will you tell us about that?
Well, he broke his neck in 2001. We were in our home in Tortola, and he went swimming. And I grew up in Southern California, and I was a big surfer and loved to body surf and board surf. And I got in, and where the inlet was, where our house rarely was almost always flat. It was hardly ever any waves. And this time there was incredible waves. And I got very excited. I said, oh my God, this is great. Let's go. We can body surf. So we jumped in. Well, I took the first wave in, and the wave crashed on the sand. And I went, this is way too dangerous. I grew up in Southern California. I know those kind of waves. You don't get in them. And I said, you got to get out. This is too dangerous. And he said, no, just one more run. And that was the run that took him out. And he turned him upside down, and he landed on his head, unbeknownst to me, because I went up to lay on the beach, and all of a sudden it was too quiet, and there was nobody on the beach, and I didn't see him. And I started praying, and I said, oh, please, God, let him be okay. And it's funny how all the Catholicism that you avoid all your life comes back again when something like that happens. And all of a sudden, he stood up out of the water holding his head, and he called my name, and I had never heard him call my name like that ever, in that tone of voice. And I started running towards him. And there was one other person on the beach, a small lady. And as she's running, you know how you get those odd moments when something happens like that, and you have odd thoughts that stay with you? And my thought when I saw her was, oh, she's so tiny, she's never going to be able to help me get him up out of the water, right? And she was amazing. And she recognized right away that he had broken his neck. And I hadn't, because I was going to put him in a car and try and rush him to the hospital. And she said, no, we have to wait for an ambulance. And to make a long story short, he had broken it in two places. Actually, the exact same accident that the actor Christopher Reeves had.
Oh, yes.
Who was so instrumental in helping change all the wheelchair laws and all of that, which was such a good thing. But in Murray's case, it had punctured his spinal column, his spinal cord. It hadn't severed it like they had Christopher's. And so he was able to go into a halo brace, and he was in it for about 6 months. And then he had a hard time. And the doctor had said it was going to take, it could take up to 4 or 5 years before he was fully recovered, because evidently when your brain gets joggled around inside your skull, it gets very bruised, but there's no way you can read the bruising on an MRI or a CAT scan. And so, or from what I understand, and certainly 20 years ago or whatever it was. And so the doctor said he could be better in a year. It could take up to 5 years, and it took about 4 before he really came back. And it was a huge transition for him, and one for both of us, because we had to start our relationship almost all over again in a way, because he wasn't able to go back to work. And at that time is when everything was changing, and we were going from film and video and all of that into digital. And by the time he came back into himself enough that he could start to think about working again, his time period had gone by, because we were well into the digital age then. And he was now getting close to 70. And there was no way that he was able to deal with computers like that and direct like that. And he decided to not direct anymore. And I was heartbroken, because he loved it so much and he was so good at it. But that was his decision, and it had to be honored. And so it took a while before he found himself again. But at the end of the 4th year, 5th year, he was back, and he came to work and became my partner in Ramscale. And at the time, he had stopped doing almost anything. I mean, he would watch movies on his computer and watch the news all day long and be part of the office, but he wasn't really there. And so I was up for a grant from the Kellogg Foundation, and he wanted to go to Tortola. And I said, I can't leave the country, but you can go down. And when I come down in about a month, I want you to have decided what you're going to be when you grow up. Because if you're not going to direct anymore, you got to do something with your life. You can't just sit around. And he said, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, think about it. You have a whole month. And when I got down there, I said, okay, what are you going to do? And he said, well, my name's on the door, because our company is called Ramscale, and he was an Aries and I was a Libra. And he said, so I'm going to help you. And I went, great. And we shook hands, and he became absolutely invaluable. And an incredible new relationship sprung out of that. And it was even more fun, if that was humanly possible. But it was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But it was hard, because when he broke his neck, he lost his self-esteem. He was physically okay, but everything crashed around him. And that's, had been talking about impotence in that time. And during that time period, it was very, very difficult for him, and very difficult for us, because most people, when you're dealing with that kind of an issue, they talk about what the men are feeling, and everybody spends all their time trying to figure out how to help the guy. And women suffer from the lack of them being able to have an erection almost as much as the men do. And a lot of people don't talk about that, because it's very difficult.
Let's talk about it. So Murray's out of the hospital. He's physically present. At what point do you realize that his injury has impacted the nerves that affect erections?
Well, at the time, and when this happened, it was, he wasn't capable. I mean, he was in a halo brace, and I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're not conducive to much. Right. And also they're if you move slightly, they can be extremely painful. So there was a long period of time when there wasn't any sex, because it was just not capable. I mean, we held hands, but even that was difficult. He was very uncomfortable having anybody around his body below him, like the grandkids and the dogs and things like that, because he couldn't see them. because he
Right.
couldn't lower his head. So there.
Okay, well, let's start right there. I mean, I know you must have been so concerned for his health and well-being, but just putting that to the side, you've had at this point, what, 30, 35 years of a robust, gratifying sex life with this man, and you basically go cold turkey for a long time. Did you
Yeah.
put attention on that for yourself? Like, what was that like for you? What were you saying to yourself during that time?
Well, it didn't bother me as much as I thought it would, actually. I was so glad to have him. I would have taken him in any way, shape, or form I could have gotten him just to have him. I mean, the sexual act wasn't that important to me.
Yeah.
And from that standpoint, but the touching and the caring and the love was very much. And that didn't go away. And so all of that was there. I mean, we still fondled each other. We did those kind of things, but there was no penetration. And one of the things
Ever again?
Oh, no, I mean, only for a period of time. I mean, it came back
okay.
after a couple of years.
I see. Okay.
And when it came back almost like it had been beforehand. I mean, we were very comfortable with each other. It happened by accident. And we discovered, oh boy, look what we've been missing, right? And so we were right back at it again. And it was comfortable. Because for a long time, I think he was always kind of afraid his head would fall off his body, you know? And so it's an odd thing when you're going through that. So it was different. It wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't, it was gratifying, it was sexy, it was wonderful, it was loving, it was tender. It wasn't as, I don't want to say, I'm trying to search for a word here. I don't want to say volatile or anything like that, but it was more gentle, do you know?
I understand. Well,
and I like that.
Yes, and in your circumstances, it was a change that was a very clear consequence of an injury. It was identified, and so you weren't left wondering if the reason
he didn't love me.
Yeah, or that he wasn't attracted to you, or that his libido had dropped. I mean, maybe it did, but it wasn't just this kind of random spontaneous thing, which is, of course, the more common phenomenon for couples who are dealing with erectile dysfunction. And when I coach couples with where erectile dysfunction is an issue, one of the things that I talk about is finding all of the other ways that there can be connection and pleasure, which it sounds like is exactly what the two of you did. And I wonder if you have any specific guidance. Let's say there's a 72-year-old woman listening to our conversation, and over the last 10 years, there's just been some disconnection because her husband has some erectile dysfunction and has a lot of self-judgment about it, so he doesn't want to take the risk of disappointing her, and there's just more and more disconnection, and with that comes a lack of affection. I know that this was not your circumstance, but you have lived experience where you can uniquely provide helpful guidance. What would you say to her or to him or to them?
Well, in my case, and I know that at first, when we were first attempting to do something and we realized that it was not the right time yet, I was trying to please him all the time. I focused on trying to make it more comfortable for him and pleasing him, and so I wasn't thinking about myself as much. And a lot of times, one of the things that is so frustrating for women, and I've heard them complain about it so much, is, especially with guys who come too soon, is that taking the time to love one another and being gentle and nurturing. Because so many times it's wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and then they're out the door. And you're going, hey, wait a minute, what about me? You know? And in that case, we didn't have that particularly, because as I was trying to help Murray, he was also touching me and fondling me. We touched one another. We liked touching, and that was enough during that time period. And then when he was capable of it and all of a sudden it happened, and it happened practically very quickly. I mean, all of a sudden he went, oh, wait a minute, I feel something happening here. And that was amazing. And then from then on, what we did was he would make me come before he did. And that was wonderful. That was absolutely wonderful. So there was more foreplay than there had been before. I mean, where it was more abrupt, more, I don't know, volatile. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
And
more directed almost.
Yes. I mean, let's get to it, right? And
yes,
now it was more tenderness. It was, nibbling on my earlobe or running his finger down my back or, little sexual things that would turn me on. And where before it was passionate and it was very intense, but it wasn't as tender. Do you know? I don't know if I'm explaining this. You're the first person I've ever said this to, by the way.
Oh, well, I think it's really clear. And what I'm going to say is a little bit cliche, but also accurate, that I feel like you're describing the difference between having passionate sex and making love together. Yes,
that's very well said. Because we made love, and it was so much love, and at the end of when we would, relax and just lie with each other, as before when he was younger, it was, okay, I gotta go. I've got to chop the wood, or I've got something I have to do, or I've got to go somewhere. Yeah. Now he was happy to just lie in bed and hold me, and that was wonderful. That was wonderful.
Yeah, and I want to just celebrate that the quality you're describing of tenderness and the lovemaking, that was there when he had no erection, and then that was there when he did again have an erection. But it's that quality that nurtured you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so important. One of the things, I had to have a knee replacement, and I have keloid skin, so I developed scar tissue, which I did not know. So instead of it being an 8-week recovery process, I ended up in a leg brace for almost a year and a half. And we still had a sex life, but at the end of it, there wasn't as much during that one period of time, during that year and a half, where it was a little bit more difficult to touch me like he had. And he did a wonderful thing for me. He got me a massage the minute I got out of all these braces. And I realized at that point how important touch is, because it was there, but we had to sleep in other separate bedrooms, which we had never done, and we had never done after that. Mainly because my brace would bang into him at night, and I would cut him a couple of times. I mean, it was pretty intense. And so at the end of the massage, I realized how many people, when they get older and they don't have anybody to touch them, and those people that snap at you if you bump into them in a line at the bank or something like that, is most of the time, I bet it's because nobody's touched them in a long time. And they don't know how to react to it. So they react with, what's that? Why are you doing that? And I think touch and all of that should be a major, major part of everybody's life, because I think we're suffering from a lack of it in many instances. And I think that's one of the things that's probably wrong with the human animal right now, is we've been suffering from lack of touch for a year and a half, 2 years now?
Yes, everybody's, because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it is really an amazing thing how just embracing for 20 to 30 seconds without making out, without it having any sexual energy, just a 20 to 30 second embrace, it causes the oxytocin to flow, the shoulders to relax, the well-being to be enhanced. What you say is so, so important. And I want to segue. I have 2 more things I really want to discuss with you. One, I ask all of my guests this question because I deeply believe that relationship relationships are the greatest vehicle for personal growth. So I'd love to know what you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Murray.
Oh, golly. Oh, so many things. I learned a great deal about compassion and how important compassion is, and that so many times we don't have much compassion for one another. And that was really incredible. That was a big one for me. And I also, he gave me so much ability to believe in myself. And not for any other reason. He didn't go tell me I was the smartest person he ever met or any of that. He just gave me, he listened to what I had to say, and he would have comments or critique. He was always the very first person I ever went to with anything to hear his feedback. And it was always so nurturing. And it gave me the ability to want to do that for other people. And I think that's part of the reason why I mentor and I'm so involved with young people. And I like having them part of my life, is that it's wonderful when you're nurtured like that. And that was very important for me. And I didn't realize how important it was until it was gone, actually. And now I know how much, what a gift that was to me. Did that answer what you wanted?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It inspires a lot of questions, particularly what it was that had you become aware of compassion. But I'm going to leave that as something open for me and any listener to just consider ourselves and ask you to speak about HipSilver. You are 80 with incredible entrepreneurial ideas. Will you talk about what it is to be a silver and what your company is all about?
I will. I got quite a few years ago, about 5 years ago, on my 75th birthday, actually, I announced to all of my friends. Oddly enough, I'm looking at a painting I did that I was on the wall so everybody could meet everybody else, because I realized that I had a lot of different things in my life and different things I did. And most of my friends did not know each other because one pocket would know each other and another pocket would know each other and that. So for my birthday, I announced that I was going to be doing HipSilver, and I put 2 big hearts on canvases on the walls, and I cut out pictures of all of my friends. And I put them in groups, and I said, and when they all arrived, I said, and it turned out, oddly enough, there were 75 people there. And I said, okay, none of you can sit with anybody you know. You go to the board, you look, I put down what everybody did, their job description, so to speak, 1 line or 2, like a producer or a writer or whatever they were. And I said, pick somebody you've never met before and spend time with them. Well, it was the most wonderful time. And I had started HipSilver because I was so sick and tired of seeing 35 and 40-year-old women modeling wrinkle cream and talking about wrinkle cream when you don't know what a wrinkle is until you hit 60. I can guarantee it positively. You may have a few lines on your face, but you don't know wrinkles yet. And also, it really bothered me that nobody was addressing our market. Now, because of the pandemic, that's changed a little bit. So I started HipSilver with the idea that it was for men and women, and it was about finding the best and the most interesting things that is for the silver age. And I'm trying to coin the term silver because somebody once referred to it as the golden years. They're not golden. That gold is soft and pliable and mushy and all of that stuff. When you get to be this age, you're silver. You're tough. You shine, but it's not a soft, pliable metal. It is a hard metal. You're usually pretty opinionated. I've met some people well into their 70s and 80s that are so strongly opinionated. But we know a lot, and we have a lot to give back. And also, we know what we want. And so that's why I have a curated site. And everything is curated by people over 55 years old. And that because I know what I need on my feet. A 22-year-old is still wearing stiletto heels. There's no way. My stiletto days were over quite a few years ago. And so everything is about finding things that are interesting, comfortable. It's about building a community. It's about having a voice. It's about finding the possibilities on making our life richer and fuller at this time. And I'm very excited about it. One of the things that I can't believe is we're very lucky because we're one of the few sites out there that almost half of our audience is men, and which is very unusual for a website like that. So we find supplies, we're doing all kinds of interesting stories on medicine, because it's not about what is happening in the cutting edge end of medicine. It's why are we getting arthritis at this age? And what can we do to make it better and help the people coming behind us so they don't make the same mistakes that we did? And what can we eat that will be better for us? So we have a fellow by the name of Rob Graham, who is a chef, but he's first and foremost a doctor. He graduated from Harvard as an alternative medicine doctor, opened his practice, worked with Andrew Weil, all the top people in the field. And then he realized all of his patients were sick because they didn't eat properly. So he quit, he had closed his practice and went back to school and became a chef. And now we call him Dr. Rob the Chef. And he talks about what the things you can eat to make your heart better. And we're now getting more and more adept at learning these things. So HipSilver is about information, it's about community, it's about beautiful things, it's about, eventually will be about travel and all of the things that we love to do at this age. And so it's a very exciting site, and we're letting it grow organically at the moment. And I'm very excited. I think we have a need for it. There's very few places for people to go and find things that are actually directly related to our age. There's people that are blogging, but we want to be the platform for the best blogs out there about the Silver Age. We want to have the best shoes. We want to have the best travel. We want to have all of the best that we can find for the Silver Age. And that's what we're building and starting to grow.
And the one thing among the very many you've already said that I think is important for people of all ages is that if you want to find a gift for someone you love who's in the Silver Age, there are amazing collections of attire and other kinds of gifts. And then
absolutely.
you don't need to wonder what your grandmother would want. You can just go to HipSilver.com and pick something there.
Absolutely. And it's going to get better and better. Now that the pandemic is lessening a little bit, please God, we have a better shot at finding more and exciting things. So the world is opening up like crazy for the Silver Age and for the people coming behind us. I mean, I even want to have a section very much like you do on where we put a panel together of maybe 5 grandparents where kids can write in, because our families are so dispersed now, and you don't have your auntie living next door or your grandmother down the street. Half the time they live halfway around the planet. And where do you go for advice and counsel when you're 18 years old, 16, 12, and you don't have anybody that's a member in your family to talk to? Where do you go? I would like to make that available.
I really love that. I think one of the lack of touch is really problematic for human beings, and the lack of role models in fantastic relationships is as well. And in this conversation, you have described an incredible relationship that defies all of the cultural presumptions about relationships becoming dehydrated over time. And I am so grateful that you've spoken about your 50-plus year love affair. I'm so glad that you've had this conversation with me, Gail. Thank you.
Oh, Alexandria, thank you. And thank you for letting me talk about Murray. He is a treat.
He's a treat and you're a treat. So thank you.
Thank you, darling, very much. And keep up the good work you're doing. It's so important.
Thank you for listening to the Intimate Marriage Podcast. For more information about Alexandra, her book, and her coaching services, go to theintimatemarriagepodcast.com.